Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to How to Nail Your Med School Interviews to be presented by Accepted consultant Sydney Foote. Before we start, I'd like to bring a few items to your attention. Sydney may ask during the presentation, she may ask a question and ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. So right now, let's test your hand-raising ability. If you are here because attending medical school and pursuing the career of your dreams let's start this all over again. If you are here because you want to ace your interview, attend medical school, and pursue the career of your dreams, raise your hand. Once I get myself untangled. Okay. Good. We have a wide awake audience that knows how to raise their hand electronically. Great. And maybe I'll even remember how to talk. Okay. Raising your hands allows you to respond to our questions. What about your questions? We have a lot of time at the end of Sydney's presentation for questions, and we'll answer them then. We use the question window for your questions, but we also use it for you to answer our questions. So if Sydney asks an open-ended question, please post your answer in the question window. You probably received via email a link to a handout that I think will help you. Yes, the webinar is free. If you can download the handout from the handout section of your control panel, I think, again, it's a great way for you to take notes, follow along, and just will help you get the most out of today's webinar. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback. I review every single feedback response, and we use it both to improve our existing webinars and to add new ones to our menu of webinars. Now, I've been told that sometimes people are very interested in the free offer we're going to make at the end of the webinar. We're going to change it around. We don't want you to be anxious about it. The mic is actually very close to my mouth. Somebody's saying, are any of you having trouble hearing me? Please raise your hand if you're having trouble hearing me. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. All right. In any case, so the offer, I don't want you folks sitting here anxiously waiting for our offer. I'm going to tell you right now what it is. $100 off a gold mock interview package. Coupon code ACEYOURIV ends January 11th, which is 3 days from now. And the coupon code is simply Save Now. And there's the URL. The gold mock interview package gives you 3 mock interviews for your next interviews for one school, but with one consultant. But thank you. Anyway, that's the offer today. We also like to learn a bit about our audience. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions before I hand the mic to Sid. How many of you are applying this cycle, in other words, 2018-19, next cycle, or later? Okay. We have over 60% having voted. Can we get it up to 80? Anybody else want to vote? 72%? 5, 4, 3. Again, the options are this cycle, next cycle, or later. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. So 77% of you are applying this cycle, which is great. 18% are planning ahead for next year, which is also fine. And 5% are even planning ahead for later. Okay, and then the next one, next poll is, have you received interview invitations? It's an easy one. Yes, no answer. Have you received interview invitations? Yes or no? Obviously, the ones applying next year are no, but anyways, let's see if we can't get it over 80%. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll. And here we go. Let's share it. So with 75% having voted, we have 58% are yes. Congratulations. and 43% are no. You're just planning ahead, hoping that you'll get them. And obviously, we had the 18% that hasn't applied yet, and 23% that hasn't applied yet. So most of those who are here from this year's cycle have received interview invitations. Great. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce Sydney Foote, who will present how to nail your med school interviews today. Prior to joining Accepted, Sydney worked as an administrator at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She's also author of the ebook Write Your Way to Medical School and 2 other ebooks. Using her healthcare experience, eagle editing eye, and storytelling skill, Sid has been helping Accepted's clients gain acceptance to demanding medical schools and residency programs for over 15 years. She's particularly skilled at interviews and will share her secrets with you during this webinar. And now, Sydney Foote will present how to nail your med school interviews.
Thank you, Linda, and welcome to everybody who's here tonight. It sounds like more than half of you have already been invited to interview, so congratulations. And if not, if you're still waiting, then there's still plenty of time left in this application season. So whatever camp you're in, I hope that what we talk about tonight will help you feel a lot more confident when you do get into that interview. I'd like to start out tonight with a short clip from the classic show ER, showing doctors who've been reluctantly corralled into doing med school interviews. I first saw it when I was working at UW School of Medicine, and it rang true then, and I think it's still true today. So Linda, could you start the video, please?
Yes, it's coming up. It takes a second to come up, but it will. Always does. All right, here we go.
Okay. Although all that is played for comedic effect, there's nothing wrong with what any of these applicants are saying. And in fact, it's exactly what doctors are supposed to be doing. Wanting to help people is very noble, and uniting science and humanism is what physicians do every day. But the problem is that if you and every other interviewee is saying it, then you won't stand out. What I want to help you to do with tonight is help your story stand out and be remembered after all this noise about helping people is gone. So tonight we're going to start with interview basics. I like to start with what to wear, what to take, those kind of questions. And these might seem too basic, but I get asked about them a lot, so we're just going to spend a few minutes covering those. After that, we'll talk about preparation and how you can construct a story that goes beyond wanting to help people to show who you really are. Then we'll tackle some of the common questions that applicants struggle with. And finally, we'll talk about practice methods. So, the basics. One thing I'm often asked is, what should I wear to the interview? Professional attire makes a positive impression, and that applicant in the video who is wearing the leather jacket, it's a really bad idea. Don't be too casual. Instead, men should go with a conservative, well-fitting suit. Darker colors like black, charcoal, and navy work very well. Make sure you pair it with a tasteful dress shirt, usually white or light blue, and a tie in a contrasting color. Burgundy, blue, or green are traditionally recommended. It's important that your suit fits well, and the sleeves aren't too long and the shoulders aren't too puffy. And same with your pants legs. Not everyone can afford an expensive bespoke suit, but paying $25 to a tailor for a few alterations can really help you make a better impression. Wear a black or brown belt that matches your shoes, and make sure your shoes are polished. Minimize your accessories. A watch and a tie pin and perhaps a wedding ring are the limit. And personally, I'm asked about facial hair a lot. It's fine so long as it's well groomed. Same with your nails. A manicure isn't necessary, but please clean yourself up. For women, There's a little more leeway fashion-wise. A suit with either a skirt or pants is fine, however you feel most comfortable. Dark blue, black, charcoal gray suits are popular, just like for men, usually with a conservative shirt underneath, although there's a regional preference here. East Coast schools tend to be more traditional than those in the West, where you might shake it up with a nice colored blouse. Keep it conservative, though. A skirt that rides up when you sit won't make a good impression, nor will a shirt that gapes open when you bend over. For shoes, closed toe looks more professional, and flat heels are a plus. You'll like to be walking a lot on interview day, so you want to be able to keep up. And again, make sure you polish them the night before. As with men, keep your jewelry and accessories to a minimum, and personal grooming is very important. Don't overdo the makeup, and don't try to do anything too fancy with your hair. Just keep it out of your eyes and away from your gestures so that it isn't distracting. There are a couple of things that I recommend doing to keep yourself calm on interview day. I'm a big advocate of over-planning, so your mileage may vary, but my suggestions for making the day go easier start the night before. First, get familiar with the campus. At the very least, investigate your public transportation and parking options. If possible, visit the day before so you can explore and get a feel for whether you might sit there. This can also spark some good questions for the interviewer. Back at the hotel, prepare your attire the night before. If it's wrinkled from traveling, borrow an iron from the hotel or hang it in the bathroom while you take a hot shower. Then the steam can release the wrinkles. Make sure your shoes are shined and that you have everything you'll need for the next morning. Also prepare what you want to bring to the interview, such as a campus map, breath mints, lip balm, a stain remover pen just in case, a book or a Kindle to read while you're waiting. Interviewers often ask what you're reading, so it should be something that doesn't sound too embarrassing. An old-fashioned pen and pad of paper is good to have as well, just so you can jot down notes while you're being interviewed without having to stare down at your phone. It's also a good idea to have access to your complete NCAS application and the secondary for that school. You likely won't need them, but sometimes reading over what you've written can soothe your anxiety. Getting everything ready the night before should help you arrive at the interview with confidence. On the day of the interview, in the waiting room, give yourself plenty of time so you can arrive early to check in. Some people find it helps to take a brisk walk to burn off nervous energy or to exercise before they report to the interview location. When you arrive, first, put your phone on silent. You want to give your full attention to whoever is checking you in. Don't underestimate the admin staff. At this point, it's a good idea to politely ask if you can get the names of anyone who will be interviewing you and write these down. This will help you both when you meet them and when you're writing thank you notes later. As you're sitting in the waiting room, you may be surrounded by other applicants, and there's often a lot of waiting. Some people use this time to review their application. Others read, others talk to their fellow interviewees. If you're in any sort of mindfulness practice, this can be a good time for some simple meditation or affirmations. Do whatever makes you the most comfortable. Personally, I find that breathing exercises can really help manage stress. Try a breathing waltz where you breathe in for 3 counts, hold it for 3 counts, then exhale for 3 counts. Doing this a few times before you're called into the interview can help you get centered, but it can also help you control the tone of your voice and allow you to speak with more confidence. No matter how centered you might be in the waiting room, that moment when you're called into the interview can bring all your anxieties to the fore. To rein them in, take just a second to compose yourself before you stand up. When you do, hold your heads high. As you take your first step forward, be aware of how you walk. Slouching is a nonverbal sign of insecurity and indifference. Enter the room with as much confidence as you can muster. A smile with eye contact, a firm handshake, and greeting the interviewer by name will help you create a positive impression. Once you're in the interview room, you'll be asked to sit at a table or possibly with nothing in front of you. In the video we watched, there were several interviewees who were leaning back in their chairs, and some even had a knee up on the desk. While you do want to be comfortable, this is overly familiar and you'll come across as unprofessional and indifferent. So instead, try to present a very positive, very affirmative impression of yourself. Here's a quick exercise that can help you get settled once you get into the interview room. We can practice it right now. Sit up straight wherever you are. Have your feet planted firmly on the ground. Take a second to just roll your fingers back, to roll your shoulders back to make sure that you're relaxed. Be aware of what your arms are doing. Are they crossed or are your hands in your pockets? These are nonverbal signs that signal discomfort or nervousness. Instead, fold your hands lightly in your lap, ready to gesture when they're needed. You should feel more comfortable and ready to start the interview in an engaged, animated tone. Next to nonverbal cues, it's your tone that says the most about your interest and enthusiasm. Being self-aware is the first step in addressing any issues. Do you sound like this when you're trying to remember what you want to say? Are the words just spilling out without any variation? Many people flatten their voices into a monotone when they get nervous. Your breath and your posture both affect this. So as you practice, try to be aware of how you're sitting and breathing. Also practice using your voice to highlight what you're saying, either through pauses, which can add impact, or by raising and lowering the tone of your voice. If you'll do this in your practice sessions beforehand, your awareness should increase, and you should be able to remedy the issue and sound more engaged during the actual interview. Other people talk faster, and their voices may rise or shake when they get nervous. Women tend to do this more, and not coincidentally, this nervous trait comes across as lower credibility. The best way to deal with this is, again, with awareness and practice. Slow down and get control of your breathing. Even if you let yourself go for a second, you can always pull it back in. Try focusing on one person in the audience as you intentionally slow down your speech and inhale. The pitch of your voice should lower as you continue. Women in particular also need to be especially conscious of upspeak, which is raising the voice at the end of sentences, and of glottal fry. That's that creaky tone that the Kardashians use. I keep harping on breath, but one of the main causes of unintentional glottal fry is that there simply is not enough breath support to carry the words that you're saying. This speech pattern undermines credibility. Reports show this is especially true when the speaker is female, and it can make you sound less educated or less trustworthy, and this is definitely not the impression you want to convey. I know that this is a lot to remember when you're in the interview, especially when you're trying to concentrate on what you want to say. However, the way you say something often has an impact on what people actually hear. If you'll practice your answers like we discussed in the next section, and are at least aware of what your body and your voice are doing, you should be able to free up some mental space to be aware of what's happening to you in the actual interview and make adjustments as needed. We'll talk about interview questions in just a minute, but right now, I'd like to fast forward to after the interview, when you'll probably just want to take off your suits and relax. Instead, take a moment, and while the experience is fresh in your mind, record as much as you can remember. Try to scribble down the questions, and if there were any that stumped you, be sure to star those. I remember one client who was so sure that she'd flubbed an answer that in her thank you note, she explained that she had been reflecting on this question after the interview, and that she wished that she had said this other thing, and she was subsequently accepted at that school. Even if you don't take such a bold step, knowing which answers you need to work on will help as you prepare for the next interview. And knowing which stories generate interest can help you figure out what you should retell in later interviews. I mentioned thank you letters earlier, and right after the interview is a great time to take care of those. You don't want them to be long. Just a few lines, preferably referencing something you discussed with that person, will go a long way to jogging their memory favorably. Write them while they're fresh in your mind and upload them to the school's online application portal, and then you can check that item off your list. Finally, treat yourself. No matter how the interview went, you survived, and you should reward yourself with some self-care. You might have a massage, go out to your favorite restaurant, or buy a book you've been wanting to read. This will help give you a feeling of closure on the interview as you leave that decision in someone else's hands. So I know I've covered a lot here. Does anybody have any questions before we go on?
Okay, there is a question here from Nat, who asked, should we bring a resume to the interview, or is it not needed? And anybody else have questions, please post in the question window.
It is technically not needed. You should not have to give it to anyone. At this point, they already like what they have seen. However, a lot of people like to have an interview with, a CV with them just in case. I wouldn't bring a lot. It's not like a job interview where you might want to hand out, 5 or 6 of them to people. But if there's a case where someone is interviewing you and may ask for it, it can be good to have. So yeah, it's not a necessity. I think that it's more important to bring bring your secondary and your application for that school just for your own composure.
Now, Kristen is asking, should the secondary be out during the interview?
No, this is for you. They, like I said, they have seen it already. They know what they like, what they see there. So no, you'll only have it in case you want to refresh your memory about what stories you've already told.
Okay. Dana asks, is it best to keep your hands folded in your lap the entire time?
No, gesturing is very important for emphasis. What you don't want to do with your hands is use them to touch your face, push your hair behind your ears, or any nervous tics. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the interview. If you are having a problem with that, then keeping them folded in your lap is a better option. But if you are more comfortable and can use your hands to gesture appropriately, then by all means use them. You shouldn't have to just sit there clenching your hands.
Okay. We have a question here. The doctors or the admissions people interview you? Do MDs or
both.
admissions? Both. Okay.
It can be, sometimes it will be alumni of the school. Sometimes it will be students. You should be told at orientation, if not before, who will be interviewing you. I mean, if not the names, then the fact that it will be an alumni or a student or an admissions representative.
But it varies, basically.
Yes, very much.
Okay. See some other questions. Mira asked, what else should we bring? You mentioned some things actually in your webinar. Can women bring a small purse, I guess, and put some of those items in the purse?
Yes, that's what I recommend. Some people bring a larger portfolio if they want to carry a lot of materials in it, but a small purse is perfectly adequate. I like to just have room for a phone, like I said, lip balm or lipstick. I would definitely have somewhere to put a book or, a small reading device just so you can have something to entertain yourself while you're waiting, because there's a lot of waiting. But yeah, you can definitely take a purse or a small briefcase kind of thing.
Okay. Matthew asks, and I think this is an interesting question, could you talk about eye contact? Is more better? Is there such a thing as too much?
Eye contact varies. I think it's very important to be able to use eye contact to judge the response of what you're saying to people. So if you're interviewing with one person, you'll want to look at the same as you would look at a friend or someone that you're interacting with in classes, as naturally as possible. By watching their reactions, you should be able to see if what you're saying resonates with them, if they want more information, or alternatively, if they're bored and you should move on to another topic. If there's multiple people in the room, eye contact's a little easier. You can then focus on one person at a time and move back and forth so you're not staring at a single person. But yeah, you don't want to stare intently without blinking at them, but eye contact is a very good thing. You want to show them that, it's a very primal sign of being open and trustworthy, so use it to your advantage in the interview.
Okay, I think one last question, then we'll move on. This one from Ben. Okay. Do all schools accept thank you notes? I've heard some schools frown upon this simply because of the volume of notes they receive.
Most schools will let you put them on the portals, the school application portals. It's become less positive to send handwritten snail mail thank you notes, and that's been quite frowned upon. If they specifically tell you not to send thank you notes, for instance, like if you're doing an MMI interview, for instance, you won't send thank you notes. But unless they state otherwise, I would definitely send a thank you. It's another time when you can make an impression on the people who are interviewing you. And if you give that, you don't want to do what they tell you not to do, but you don't want to give up that opportunity to make a positive impression.
Okay. We actually have quite a few questions. I know there's time for Q&A at the end also, but I think we should move on and then come back to the questions. So attendees,
Okay.
if you have questions as Sid is talking, feel free to raise them, and then we'll try and get to them at the end. But I think you've had great questions, and thank you for sharing them.
They're very good questions.
Yeah.
I want to get into talking about the content. We've talked about a lot of these physical things that you can do that will help you prepare, but now I want to talk about how the story of you can be crafted and how you can make a positive impression with that. You could start out by writing out the perfect answers to every question and then memorizing them and then reciting them back. This is a great approach if you're an accomplished actor on the level of Meryl Streep. But if you're not comfortable memorizing scripts and delivering them verbatim, you're going to have trouble with this. What I'd like to help you do instead is to prepare efficiently and get comfortable enough with your stories that you can share them in a positive, affirmative, engaging way. Obviously, I can't give you answers to the questions you'll be asked, but hopefully I can give you this method for addressing them, which should help you answer both the questions that you expect to get and those you never saw coming. To do that, I begin with a few key questions. First of all, your goals. How do you want the interviewer to think of you? When you finish, what are the 3 key impressions you want to leave with them? 2, what are your strengths? What can you tell them about yourself that will reinforce your strengths and address your weaknesses? 3, how can you show them that you know a great deal about the school, that you're well prepared for the interview? And just as importantly, how can you learn what you need to know to decide which school to attend? Preparing the answers to these questions takes place long before the interview. In fact, you can start tonight, and the earlier you start, the better. In answering these questions, you'll set goals for the interview and give yourself a clear idea of the impression you want to leave with the interviewer beyond that desire to help people. So let's break these down a bit. And I'd like to start by asking you to take just a moment and share how you might want an interviewer to think of you. Could you please type that in the question box, just to give me an idea of what are the things that are important for the interviewer to know about you. I'm not asking for things like,
they're starting to come in. They're starting to come in, Sid.
Okay.
Composed and professional, prepared. That was Matt. Yep. That you are committed to medicine. Katrina, Mira,
right.
Passionate, hardworking, authentic. My passion for medicine.
Good.
Strong interpersonal communication skills. My experiences. Confident. Unique. Passion. Earnest. Creative. Competent, compassionate, enthusiastic. Confident and capable. I think it would be more like a happy and a passionate person, a go-to person. Professional, my clinical experiences and passion for palliative care. Different, passion for working on a team to solve a bigger problem. Dogs come in?
Sorry, keep going.
Okay. Introspective, empathy, self-reflective. I gave a few I skipped, but you got most of the response. Fantastic responses, folks. I love your participation. The moment of really movement worked. Sorry?
Those are really good ones. I love the authentic and creative and introspective confidence. Those are all really strong. I like for these to go beyond that I'm committed to medical school, or that I'm a hard worker, or that I've had valuable experiences and helped me be a good doctor. Everyone who's applying is going to have those. So what you need to do is figure out what are the things that make you unique. If it's introspection, that's great. That's a really good one. Being that self-awareness, for instance, is a really good way to show that you understand yourself and you can use that to advance your studies. I want you, as you're thinking about these, to think about it in the context of that old gem of a question. If there's 50 applicants in this room, why should we pick you? This is what your personal statement and your secondary essays have already started to answer. And if you've done a good job of those, which you did if you're being invited to interview, then you'll be able to pull out these elements to expand. So a good place to start is to go through those carefully and pull out 3, maybe 4 main qualities that you want to leave with the admissions officer. In your answers, if you keep coming back to these main ideas, reiterating them and reaffirming them, then you'll instill them in the mind of the interviewer. And when they're thinking of you later as they're writing their reviews, those are the things they're going to write about. So what I'd like you to do now is take these qualities, whether it's your great communication skills, your confidence, your creativity, your earnestness, and think of a couple of personal stories that demonstrate each quality you've listed. If these truly are your qualities, then this exercise should be pretty easy. You should have several instances where you've demonstrated each characteristic. Some of your stories will illustrate multiple qualities, which is even better. To put it another way, I'm asking you to think about your own qualities and characteristics rather than answers to specific questions. It's a shift in thinking that should give you a lot more flexibility during your interview and should really help you prepare. For instance, one applicant describes his research like this. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. My main role is inputting and interpreting data. I'm involved in weekly group discussions and have authored a review to determine efficacy. I'm also working on another review now, and I'm interested in collecting data from various articles. It's a pretty basic description of just about every research project. It's not inaccurate, but it's not going to thrill anyone either. However, from these few lines, the applicant could pull out elements of maturity, critical thinking, and collaboration, some of the strengths that he wants to convey to the interviewer. But instead of making the interviewer do that for him, he brings it to the fore. So, next slide. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. What's really interesting about my work is that while inputting and interpreting data, my critical thinking skills have gotten much stronger. Now I'm understanding the subtleties in the data and detecting patterns that I want to explain. Our lab is very collaborative, and I always look forward to contributing at our weekly group discussions and hearing about our projects. This description automatically sounds more engaging. The applicant is telling the same story, but this time they're pulling out elements that they enjoy and that they're good at. But remember how I said not to write out the perfectly phrased answer? If you can only remember a few key points you want to make, then you can much more easily revise these on the fly. Here's what your outline might look like. You were in the Johnson Lab for 3 years. That demonstrates continuity. You're involved in inputting and interpreting data. That evidences your critical thinking skills. And your contributions in hearing others demonstrates, or the work in a collaborative environment demonstrates your contributions and learning from others. So when you're in the actual interview situation, you can use these main points to structure your argument in your own words and to really bring out the personality behind it. But what if you don't get asked about research? What if you're asked instead how you've worked with teammates? In that case, the story is easily modified. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. Our lab is very collaborative. At our weekly group discussions, everybody has a chance to share their projects and help each other with problems. Inputting and interpreting data can be solitary work, but when I'm sharing the patterns that I want to explain, and the patterns that I want to explain, I find that input from other lab members has really helped my critical thinking skills. If you get very comfortable telling your stories and know the elements that they illustrate, it's much easier to recycle your answers, put them in different orders, and use them to answer any unexpected questions with no trouble. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Okay, any questions? Great advice. That's not a question, but it's a great reaction. Somebody's asking about MMI, and we did a whole, Sydney's colleague, Alicia McNeese-Namankar, did a whole webinar on MMIs, and I will post the URL for that one.
Yeah, this is very much just the traditional preparation.
Can these be used in the essays? You're welcome, Allison.
Absolutely. The people that I'm working, my clients that I work with on their secondaries, I do this with them all the time. We will use the same stories, but bringing out different qualities. The thing is, If you get to know your stories very well and you're able to identify what traits or elements they represent, you'll have a lot more flexibility in answering both your essays and your interview questions.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go into the next one now.
Okay. And I'm going to post
This
this
is a fun one.
MMI information. Go ahead. Don't wait for me, Sid.
Okay. I want to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Med schools are fond of asking applicants to identify these, and people usually struggle with them. If you've already figured out what qualities are present in your stories, though, you've got a big advantage. Let's say you've prepared a way to talk about your research, your community service, and your work on an international mission. So far, you've only been asked about your mission and community service work. So this could be an opportunity for you to bring up your research, which, as you've already decided, illustrates your critical thinking skills or your teamwork abilities. So you could choose one of these as your strength, pop in your example from the lab, and away you go. Your greatest weakness is going to be trickier. But again, it's about framing your answer. Nobody is perfect, and med schools want students who are self-aware. They want to see that you know what needs work. They also want to know that your weakness isn't limiting you or debilitating you in any way, and they want to see that you're working on it. There's no point in saying you're a perfectionist, but you might be overly detail-oriented. That's not necessarily a bad thing in medical fields. Or you might have a tendency to bite off more than you can chew and feel like you're letting people down. This is a common problem for med school applicants. At the other extreme, you might be shy or have trouble taking risks. Any of these weaknesses might be severely debilitating, or they might be no big deal. But I think it's human nature to imagine the worst. So your job is to rein in imagination. Explain how your shyness kept you from joining clubs in high school, or share a time when you had trouble balancing all your responsibilities. This will set boundaries for your weakness, hopefully ones that aren't insurmountable. Sharing what you've done to overcome your weakness is important as well. Whether you've explored better time management techniques that help you handle all of your responsibilities, or joined a local Toastmasters club where you've worked on public speaking and overcome your shyness, you're showing the interviewer that you don't just know about your weakness, but that you're taking the steps to conquer it. Now, the other question about weaknesses regards the weak spots on your application. Do you have a failed class or even a bad year? A big gap that you need to explain. My approach here is that you don't need to bring it up unless you're asked because, as I said before, they like everything that they've seen. But if they do ask, it might sound cliched, but honesty really is the best policy. Frame your answers in a way that shows that you accept responsibility for whatever happened. Don't blame it on someone else. And that show that you've learned from the experience. Again, preparing these answers ahead of time and practicing them can go a long way to addressing them in an interview. As well as knowing your stories, you need to show that you know a great deal about the school. You can subtly introduce this information in your answers. You might do this by linking your research interest to one of their programs, or by describing your interest in global medicine by mentioning their global health exchange. For example, if you're asked about your research with targeted insulin receptors, you might start your answer with something like, I'm glad you asked me about that, because the East Harlem Health Outreach Partnership on Diabetes is one of the main reasons I'm drawn to Mount Sinai. My research, and then you could close after explaining what you've done with something like, I learned a lot about diabetes in the lab, and now I would really like to see how diabetes is treated in the community here. So where do you get these kind of details? Your first stop should be the program's website. You probably already visited it if you had to explain why you were drawn to the school in your secondaries. But often the most useful place for this kind of information is in their news section. This is where you'll find what the school is excited about. Is there a new obstetrics wing or a simulation lab that they're especially proud of? Did a research program in your subject area just get funding? Have they created a new scholarship for med student missions? These are the kind of things that admissions people love to talk about, and the kinds of things that you should know before setting foot on campus. And how about that question, why should we choose you over other applicants? I like to start this one with humility, with an acknowledgement that every person they're talking to is qualified and would be a great medical student, before breaking down those 3 impressions or qualities that you chose earlier. Show them that you know yourself, and this will help show them how you fit in the class. Before we move on to practice methods, let's talk about how to handle that most dreaded question of all. Tell me about yourself. This is often one of the first questions you'll encounter at an interview, and it's where you'll establish these ideas that you want to present. Your first line should probably not be, "My name is." They already know this, and you don't have to follow that with, "I was born in." Although this can work well, and you can tackle the whole question in chronological order, finding a common theme that pulls together the elements of your experiences can be even more engaging. What I like to do with my clients is to have them tackle this question with an information dump, introducing any ideas they might want to include, whether it's family background, cultural upbringing, interest in science or research, community or clinical activities, sometimes personal hobbies, whatever it might be that explain who they are. After this brain dump, we repackage it. We tease through the different threads and find what they have in common. For instance, you might want to set up your answer around a person or idea that inspires you, as a research-oriented applicant whose mother immigrated from China did when she framed a life dedicated to teaching in the terms of her mother's determination to find a better world. My strongest trait is my love of learning, inherited from my mother. She fought to attend college in China and never let me forget how precious education was. This gives that person a chance to talk about how they've nurtured the love of discovery after immigrating to the U.S. and that curiosity they have about the natural world, leading into the research experiences that they've had. Discovering new ways to see through photography as one of their hobbies is another thing they might want to tell about themselves. And that they want to share the gift of education with others, talking about their health education outreach. Closing this introduction would be a simple statement like, "My mom was determined to discover a better world, and I'm continuing that quest with a career in medicine." Or you might want to highlight qualities like discipline and teamwork, like this applicant with a strong history of community service did. Growing up in Texas, I thought I'd be a professional baseball player. But when I turned 17, I realized I enjoyed volunteering at the nursing home more than being on the field. It's always good to embed your qualities and details of your life. Often, it's these atypical background questions that are background details that catch the interviewer's attention. There's a good chance that they'll ask this applicant about his baseball career, which could help him stand out. An older, non-traditional student might ramble through the twists and turns of his career, which runs the risk of boring listeners. Or he might start out with a startling statement like, "My high school biology teacher said I'd never amount to anything. As I spent a couple of years painting houses in the hot Florida sun, I thought he was right. But today, I work for a vaccine company supporting 35 scientists and training nurses on medical equipment. How I got here is an interesting story." Again, it's that interesting story, those details that are yours alone, that can make the difference and make the interviewer remember you. These are all real answers, with the details changed, of course, and my clients and I have developed based on what initially seemed like a mass of unconnected ideas. The key is to get these ideas out before you try to make sense of them. Writing them, or possibly recording them, is the brain dump that you need. If a friend or admissions consultant can help you sort through these, so much the better, since it's often hard to be objective about your own experiences. I'm often asked if this answer needs to explain an applicant's motivation for medicine. While I think that the stories you share should naturally lead to that, I think that's basically a different question. While you will probably have aspects pointing to your interest in medicine, whether it's experience in research or clinical work, for instance, you'll need more if you truly want to tell them who you are. So, in short, the idea behind this is to make sure that you know your answers. You haven't just memorized them. Trying to memorize a script is a recipe for disaster. Sets up for failure if a question is not asked in the exact same way or you forget a line. Instead, focus on learning the stories that you can adapt for different purposes and that you are comfortable telling in various ways. I could stop for questions there if there's been any, Linda, or I could do the last part on practice.
Why don't we do the last part on practice? And there are
Okay.
actually quite a few questions, but I think we should.
Oh, there might be.
Yeah.
Okay. This part's pretty quick. What I want you to remember is that you want your interviews to feel conversational, engaging, and unrehearsed. This is hard to do unless you rehearse it, especially when you're feeling nervous and maybe even a little desperate. Practice is the only thing that will help you feel more comfortable and even natural telling your stories. There are many ways you can practice, both by yourself and with others. First, talk to yourself. For me, this is by far the most useful way to practice telling your stories. Talk to yourself when you're driving in a car, when you're in the shower, when you're washing dishes, any time that you're alone. I really like this method because I think it helps you get comfortable talking about yourself in different ways without setting aside a designated practice time. You don't even have to answer any specific question. You can just talk about your research as you would to a friend, or talk about the one thing you really wish you could improve on. By doing this frequently, it's really going to help you feel more comfortable and natural in the actual interview. Second, record and listen to yourself. I don't recommend you do this every time because it gets away from that informal storytelling that you get when you talk to yourself. But do it at least once at the start of the practice so you can see how you sound to others. And if you have any of those issues like a monotone or filler words like or actually, then you can know about them and be able to address them. Also, if you want help, YouTube is full of speech coaches who address every issue imaginable so you can sound more clear and confident. So that's a good resource. Third, debate yourself. I like to do this with ethical or philosophical questions. Usually there's no right or wrong answer to these. They just want to, they're intended to just show whether you can think challenging topics through. It's one thing to read them and then to regurgitate what's said, but to really understand these issues, debating both sides of the issue is a really good way to do it. Argue both sides of a popular debate, abortion, for instance, or cannabis legalization. Presenting these will ensure that you really understand them and can make a coherent argument for or against an issue. Fourth, practice with a webcam or a mirror. This is great for detecting nonverbal cues. Check to see if you're leaning forward to answer questions or drawing back defensively, or if you're making some annoying gestures with your hand. Fifth, practice with other people. Give your parents or roommates or best friends a list of questions and have them fire them at you. Be sure to ask for honest feedback, though, or they won't give it to you. Or sixth, you could schedule a mock interview with a consultant. We're paid to give you honest feedback and can be a useful tool to help you identify and address these difficult questions. You can start practicing anytime. In fact, you've already started. So the more aware you are of your personal characteristics, the more likely you are to have time to address them. And the more accustomed you are to sharing your stories, the more comfortable you'll be in the interview. That's it. I know there's a lot riding on your next interview, and I hope what we've talked about will help you nail it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Good luck to you all.
Sid, thank you so much for this informative webinar. I've attended it in the past. I'm always impressed with how much you pack into under an hour. I'm sure everyone here now has the tools to nail that interview. We'll take additional questions in just a minute. But now it's my turn to share a few thoughts about the med school interview. If you are lucky enough to get called for interviews, and obviously many of you already have, first of all, celebrate. You've made enough of an impression, a positive impression, with your primary and secondary applications for the admissions committee members to want to invest their time in getting to know you better and seeing if you are a fit for their community. That invitation represents opportunity, but it also represents risks. Are you going to present yourself in your interview as a future professional? Are you going to come across as someone who would be a thoughtful member of their community and later a compassionate physician whom the interviewer could see treating his or her loved one? Are you going to successfully implement all the excellent advice that Sid provided today? That's your challenge, and it's a challenge Sydney and her colleagues here at Accepted would like to help you meet with flying colors. I'd like to tell you about a call I had not too long ago. An applicant called inquiring about our med school mock interview package. I gave her the details, and at the end, she said, I have one more question. Why do I need this service? Can't I just interview on my own? Can't I just research the schools, think about likely questions, and my best answers? So I asked her, have you ever performed either in music, theater, or the arts? She said, yes, I play piano. Would you consider performing without rehearsing? Would you want to get on stage after just thoroughly reviewing the musical score and thinking about it? Well, our mock interview is like a rehearsal. And like all rehearsals, it allows you to improve and polish your performance before the big day. Let's look at sample feedback from people who have had their dress rehearsal with Accepted. Upper left, Sydney, thank you so much for your help so far. I've been really successful in the admissions process. I've been invited to 17 interviews, accepted at 4 schools, and awarded a full scholarship at one of them. The one below it. I don't think I would be at the same place today without your, Sydney's, help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11, accepted to 5, waitlisted to 4. The one on the right. Sydney is wonderful, but she sometimes does get booked, so I don't want you to think that she's the only one who can do interview prep here. I had the pleasure to work with Alicia to prepare for my medical school interview. Through our many practice sessions, I felt confident and prepared the day of the interview and was fortunate to receive an acceptance to medical school of my dreams. These applicants are pursuing their medical school dreams, and I'd like to urge you to follow the path they took so that you too can pursue your medical school dreams. It's really quite simple. Visit the page on the screen, exhibit.com/mediv, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, the practice, the rehearsal, and then interview confidently and effectively. Now, with that, I want to take your questions. We have several excellent questions here. Okay. Anna asks, would you recommend talking about sports if they ask about teamwork skills, or should you stick to academic teamwork? Sid, you there?
No, absolutely. Talk about, yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, absolutely talk about sports, especially team sports. Those are a really good way to show how you've developed leadership and teamwork skills, which are very important for medicine. But yeah, sports and extracurriculars involving things far removed from academics are always great fodder for interviews.
All right, hold here. Let's see. We also have Asma asks, what else can they ask us besides research and teamwork? Lots of things.
So many things. I mean, they may ask you about, well, they may just go through your CV, ask you questions about anything on it. So be prepared to talk about that. As well, they might ask you where you grew up. They may ask you about your family. They may ask you about important transformative experiences you've had. What's the most challenging thing you've ever done? The variety is pretty much endless in terms of the topics that they may ask you. What I think the best way to deal with this is to know your stories so that you can pop them in various places. So if they ask you about places you've lived, use that as a springboard for understanding your it can be like your collaboration skills that you develop there, by being in a new environment, if you moved a lot, for instance, or whatever it might be. But knowing these stories is going to help you no matter what they ask.
Okay.
I wish I could narrow it down for you more, but I mean, I have a question. I have about 60 questions that we go through for practice interviews, and that's not even all of them. So.
Yeah, they can also ask why this school, about leadership experiences, teamwork experiences, overcoming failure.
Ethical questions.
Right. Which actually leads to the next question.
Care.
There's one question here that I wanted to ask was about ethical questions. Just give me a second to find it.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
While you're looking for that, if you want information about ethical questions, first of all, go to the University of Washington's bioethics website. That it is a great resource for different patient care issues with a really good explanation designed for clinicians about how to deal with challenging topics. Everything from blood transfusions to consent and, DNRs, everything that you might possibly need to discuss. And it's a really great way to summarize the issues.
All right. And you might have just answered the question I was about to ask. What are your recommendations in terms of ethical questions?
Yep, that's it. University of Washington bioethics page. Also, read JAMA. JAMA has some great discussions, of what's current in the field, and that's a really good resource as well.
Okay. Joe asks, I was placed on a pre-interview hold. Is there anything I can do to increase my chances of getting an interview?
Oh, gosh. So unfortunately, with the way the new traffic rules are working, it seems like that's going to be more and more common. They are putting more people on hold and interviewing as they think spots are becoming available. So the one thing I would encourage you to do, especially this time of year, is to send update letters. Anything that you've done that warrants them knowing. That is a really good way to keep in touch and to tell them that you're still interested, which is so important. As well, if they accept additional letters of recommendation, get another letter. Have someone send it in. Use every resource that you can to keep in touch with the school. Keep telling them that you love them, and tell them that you want to be, that if given a chance to interview, you'll be able to show them how you can be an asset to the program.
Okay. Christina asks, as a non-traditional student, how much should I share about my first career and passion to pursue medicine now versus a more general tell me about yourself? Not sure I fully understand the question, but how do you deal with that prior career, I think, is really what this is about.
That's a great question. Yeah. I've worked with so many people that have been hesitant to talk. I had one woman who was a practicing lawyer for years, and she was really hesitant to talk about her background. And I finally convinced her, and she ended up just having the most successful medical career. But she used what she'd learned and showed how it was relevant to the work that she wanted to do in medicine. You can't hide from your past. Use it, figure out why it's important, what skills it's given you, and why you definitely have to show that now you're committed to medicine, but don't show them that everything before now has been a waste. Emphasize how what you've learned in the past gives you, unique insights that other people won't have, especially as very traditional students who've only been in one field. Bring that past into your uniqueness and show them how important it is.
Okay. Let's see. What was the code for the discount again? That's from Matthew. It's Save Now. It's also on your screen right now. Okay. Let me get to some other questions. What's the name of that website? You want to give the University of Washington website one more time?
Yeah, in fact, it's the bioethics site. Let me see if I can find it.
That's the University of Washington Bioethics?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead with another question. I can look it up.
Okay, let me find the question. I got a lot of questions coming in. Is it advisable to share that one has a chronic illness that motivated them to pursue medicine? Probably would depend, right?
It would depend, especially if it's something that's been treated, that's manageable. But yeah, I mean, I think that it would definitely be case by case. If it is something that you've managed, then show that it hasn't affected, that you're able to cope with it, that's been treated, and that it will not, be a detriment to your practice of medicine.
Okay, I think Katrina actually found it. Unfortunately, I can't copy it, but.
Okay. Oh, I just sent it to you too, Linda. It's departments.washington.edu/.
Okay, I see it. I'll share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Hold
awesome.
on a second. Okay, here you go, everybody. It'll be in your chat window. No, it didn't work. Yeah, it did. Okay, I think you should all have it now. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Can fidgeting be equal to slouching?
Could what?
Fidgeting, nervous tics, fidgeting.
Oh. So slouching indicates that you're not interested, that you're indifferent, that you kind of don't care. Fidgeting indicates a high level of nervousness. It's not a great trait, so definitely try to minimize it. I think keeping your hands in your lap is a good way to avoid it. If you are like bouncing your leg up and down, just be aware of what your body is doing. I think that's the biggest disconnect when people are nervous, is that they don't pay attention to what the rest of their body is doing. And that's, again, where practice comes in. I keep saying that. I sound like a broken record, but it's very important to know what you're going to say, so that you can spare a part of your brain to deal with what the rest of your body is doing and what kind of mindset you have.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes. I just want to share with you feedback from, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name correctly, so I'm not going to try, but from one of the participants: this seminar has been awesome. How will we be able to access the recording later? We'll be sending out via email a link, and it'll also be on the blog and the site, so you'll have access to it. Okay, let's see. There's some excellent questions here. Wait a minute. The screen bounces around. That's why I keep losing my place. Mira asked, during the interview, what can we have out in front of us? Do we actually write things down? Great question.
Usually you won't have anything. What I like to do is have if you're carrying a purse or a portfolio or anything with you, have that next to you, and if they say something that you want to write down, it's like, excuse me, I really want to write that down, and then just take the pen and pencil out and write it. Otherwise, you won't. They're going to be asking you questions, and it's going to be more like a conversation. It's not a thing where you have to take notes. But if they mention a research paper that relates to something that you've talked about, show your interest and show them that you really want to pay attention to it, and take a second to write it down. It just shows how interested you are.
Okay. Anna asks, would a backpack be a professional bag to bring to carry book notes, etc., or the lip balm, whatever you need? No. Okay. Well, would you recommend just carrying material? Okay. Answered.
Yeah. Like a shoulder, like a messenger bag. If it's a professional looking one, it looks much better than a backpack.
Okay. All right. Let's see what else we have.
Also, there's some nicer backpacks, and then there's the old jams that I've been carrying around for years. So it depends, I should say.
Right.
There are some nicer ones.
Okay, so there was a question here, and I'm not finding it now, but it was basically that somebody was placed on hold. I mixed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And he's going to be near the school that has placed him on hold. Can he contact the school and say, I'm going to be in your vicinity? Any chance I could interview?
Yes, absolutely. They're called in the area letters, emails, and they're really good if you're traveling long distances that you otherwise would not be in. I mean, it's not a guarantee. Schools are not going to say, oh, we weren't going to interview you at all, but since you're here, why not? But if they have any intention of, possibly interviewing you, they'd love to be able to save you some money. So, I would go for it. It's not going to hurt your chances. If anything, they'll just say they can't accommodate you.
Is it appropriate to have a list of thought-out questions typed out in front of you, or should we memorize our questions for the interviewer?
I don't like to have the questions printed out to carry. I don't think that looks very professional. Just have a few. 3 questions is usually all you'll be able to ask, if that many. So I would just have some in your mind and just memorize those before you go.
All right. This is from Alexis. I've only heard back from about 1/3 of the schools I applied to so far. The other schools have not given me any admissions decision. I feel that just waiting around is too passive. What else can I do? Great question. Wonderful audience.
Yeah, it is a horribly long process waiting for the schools. The good news is that you haven't been rejected, so you're still in the running. To make an impression on them and to get higher on that list of the people they're calling to interview, send them updates. Tell them what you've been doing. Tell them how it enhances your fit for the school, and tell them just how interested you are in going there. These love letters to schools, some people call them, can be really valuable in showing, and helping you stand out in the midst of so many other applicants who, are also, waiting decisions.
Okay. Alexa asks, are there any books you recommend for preparing for the interview? We have a section of the site. I don't know of any books.
Yeah, I don't have any books I recommend. I do recommend the Student Doctor Network's interview feedback, because there's a lot of questions there. They used to tell you what dates the questions were asked, but they seem to have removed that. So you don't know if the questions are for the current season or not. But it's still a really good way to see what other people's experiences are.
And I just posted in the chat window a link to a section of our site that has a variety of interview tips. It doesn't have the feedback database that Sid just mentioned, but it does have a variety of many different articles on medical school interviews. So that should be of some help. And here it is again. Okay. Let's see. How do you send them? This is from Mira. How do you send them updates if you're waiting for interviews from them? That is.
You can send them through the school portal, the application portal. You can also send them by mail, or you can email them.
Okay. And another question related to update letters. How many update letters would you recommend, and what are some things you could include in an update letter? If you are a non-traditional student, have no grade updates or anything academic.
So, yeah, it doesn't need to be academics. I mean, the transcripts and stuff like that that's you definitely send them those as another part of updates. But it's more important to show them that you haven't given up on your preparation for medical school once you submitted your secondary application. So, I mean, at this point of the year, I would send the update as soon as you can. This is a big time for movement. People are getting interview invites right now. Anywhere from November, December on, it's a good time to start sending those updates to schools. I start with a longer update for the first one that really focuses on both what you've done and why you want to go to that school. Subsequent an update letter should only happen when you have something substantive to tell them. So something like this would be if you've continued shadowing, for instance. Even as a non-traditional student, you should be continuing to explore medicine, finding out what different specialties are like. So shadowing a new doctor would be a good way to include that in your update. You might also include extracurricular activities or volunteer service. So if you are taking on a more responsible role at a volunteer group that you're working with, if you are having more patient interactions than normal, if you are not involved in medicine but are in clinical work, but you are working, say you're working in a company and you get promoted to another job, to another more responsible role, that's another thing that's really important. But show how that's relevant to medicine. So if you're leading people, if you're managing disputes, if you're having to do anything involving organization or customer complaints, whatever it might be, those can all be really valid items to include in an update letter.
Okay, great. Sid, I want to thank you again for the outstanding webinar and for all the answers you just gave. I also want to thank the webinar attendees and participants. Your participation has been fantastic. Your time, your attention, your questions, your answers. I think we've really had a marvelous audience. And if this weren't a virtual event, I'd suggest that you just give yourself all a round of applause. I also want to share the last thought before we leave for the evening. Remember the applicants who had their dress rehearsals when accepted med school admissions expert? It's far better to go into the interview knowing you're prepared and ready than to be in the interview wishing you'd had that dress rehearsal beforehand. Do as these applicants did, right? Remember, here's the steps they took. They went to accept.com/mediv. They chose the gold package, which is the one that has the special for you folks, or they told our individual mock interview package. They got the guidance they needed, and they interviewed confidently and effectively. Do as they did. They are now pursuing their med school dreams, and you can too. Have a very good evening.
Thank you, everyone.